Well, thank you. I'm excited to be here from South Dakota as a beef producer and someone that's got boots in the ground, raising beef cattle and making my living on our family's cattle ranch. Now, today's presentation, I really want to approach in a delicate way because I always preach that I never want to pit production methods against one another. And so, grass-fed, natural, organic, conventional beef, they're all great options for our consumers to select from. And very likely, plant-based proteins or lab petri dish proteins might also be viable options for our consumers and a way to provide protein to feed a hungry planet. However, if there's one thing that I want to make abundantly clear, and one take-home message that I want each and every one of you to think about as you go home, and in particular, if you're the press, I want you to pay close attention to what I'm about to say. Mother Nature wasn't wrong. The beef cow is amazing. And what today's modern cattlemen and women have been able to accomplish in converting that beef animal into a nourishing, safe, and wholesome protein product with life-enriching byproducts is nothing short of incredible. And so today I want to talk to you about what the beef cow can do that simply cannot be replicated in a plant-based patty or in a petri dish. And so just kind of to set the stage, and there's a lot of ground to cover in both of these topics, and I think we could spend hours talking about both plant-based proteins and the lab proteins. But I guess as far as what to call it has been somewhat of a large discussion in recent months. And so I've seen these products called everything from clean meat to cell-cultured proteins, petri dish patties, lab slime, faux meat, the sham burger, my personal favorite, make-believe meat, fake meat, and the list goes on. And a quote that really sticks out to me is this, is no matter what these products, whether it's the vegetarian option or the petri dish option, they're all kind of being marketed and sold and propped up by the media as kind of this false, moral, and environmentally superior product. And so I want to just make this disclaimer right off the bat. I'm a rancher, so before anybody says, well, she came here with an agenda. Yeah, I did. I'm biased. I live on a cattle ranch. My family eats beef. We love beef. We believe in our product. And I want to be doing this today. And I want my family to be in the beef industry 100 years from now as well. And like Mark Lyons said this morning, I think the beef producer is up for the challenge of feeding a growing plant or a hungry planet. And so just a few caveats I want to throw out there. I'm not anti-technology. I think advancements in food science in order to feed the world are incredible. But I am pro-truth in labeling. And the fact that these products want to be labeled as meat is something I maybe have a hard time wrapping my head around. I'm not anti-competition. I believe beef is king for a reason and will remain king in the future. We can handle that competition in the grocery store. However, I also believe in pro-consumer choice. I believe that the consumer should not only be able to distinctly decide what products they want to buy, but they shouldn't be tricked by something that's on the label. I'm not without bias, but I am pro-transparency. And unfortunately, these companies, in particular, the petri dish protein patties, haven't been very forthcoming with their processes as of yet. I'm not an expert at this. Just like many of you, I've been trying to figure out what these companies are up to and what it means for those of us in agriculture, in animal agriculture, and how we can remain viable in the future as they enter the marketplace. But I am pro-safety, food safety, and so I think these companies have a long ways to go in proving their vulnerabilities and how they overcome those issues of contamination, just like beef producers have had to for all these decades and years. Frankly, I'm not going to eat it because I prefer real, great-tasting beef. And so I touched on this just briefly, but is beef afraid of the competition? That's what I hear so often. Just like the dairy industry has had to contend with the almond and cashew and oats and pea milks, is beef worried that we're going to suffer the same fate in dealing with side-by-side comparisons in the meat case? I don't think so. However, one thing that really bothers me is that these companies, while disparaging traditionally raised beef production, are also using our nomenclature, beef or meat in order to prop up their products. Meaning, all these years that beef producers have invested their dollar checkoff into promoting beef, into creating the iconic "Beef It's What's for Dinner" slogan, and doing the research to get new beef cuts to add value to our carcass, and educating our consumers and teaching them about the best cuts and preparation methods. All of that work and investment that we have done as cattle producers is being basically hijacked from these other companies who haven't had a stake in our protein and are trying to use our great reputation to sell their products. And so just a quick kind of overview of the plant-based proteins before I dive into the Petri dish. These are just some of the retailers that have introduced the Beyond Burger or Impossible Burgers to their menus. And I just saw a headline here before I hit the stage that said, more retailers and fast food joints better put vegetarian options on the menu or face the consequences. And so we see these companies escalating in value and popularity, and they're all the buzz. And the thing is they're not really being marketed to your traditional vegan or vegetarian. They're being promoted as a direct and complete comparison or replacement for a traditional beef patty. So an example of this is Burger King introduced the Impossible Whopper in a few locations in the United States. And the thing about the Impossible Whopper and the Impossible Burger in general is it's not meant to be a vegetarian burger. It's meant to mimic the taste, texture, and appearance of beef, meaning that they add ingredients to make it ooze so it looks like it's bleeding red, and they want it to taste just like beef. Now, Burger King has gone even a step further in their campaign where they're duping their customers who love the Whopper, and after they enjoy the burger, they're saying, hey, gotcha, that was actually a plant-based burger. Now, talking about transparency and consumer choice and being open and upfront with your customers, to me, that marketing campaign seems a little tone deaf. And I guess one thing I also should add on that note is that not only are they marketing these products as direct replacements to beef, but they're doing a lot better than the decades-old version of these products. So I got to tell a little story. 12 years ago, I lived in Washington, D.C. I was a college student there for an internship with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. I moved into my dorm room at George Washington University and met my roommate for the summer. Her name was Meredith, and she was a vegetarian from New Jersey. Now, to say we were polar opposites is an understatement because I'm just this farm girl from South Dakota. But over the course of the summer, I got to learn a lot of insights about why Meredith was a vegetarian and what values she was placing on her decisions when she went to the grocery store. Now, I'll tell you this, living in a dorm room where I have to smell those god-awful veggie burgers was kind of a tough task. But what I realized during that summer was that the consumer has the same values that we do. And I'll touch on what those values are and how the beef producer can go from being on the defensive, where we have to constantly explain what we do in our industry, to how we can go on the offense and talking about why our product truly is superior. Now, moving on to the Petri dish proteins, it's interesting, Winston Churchill said this however many years ago, predicting that we would be in this place where we're growing a chicken breast or a wing in a Petri dish in a growth medium instead of on a farm, or a beef burger on a ranch. And so these Petri dish proteins are making really grand promises in their small laboratories. So how did we get there? These are just a few infographics, and I won't go into them in detail, but basically what we can figure out about these proteins products is basically conjecture, meaning these companies haven't been very forthcoming with their manufacturing processes, so this is kind of our best guess. And of course, there is a live animal involved with the fetal cells coming from that biopsy. They have to grow in a growth medium, often from corn or soybeans, at 98 degrees Fahrenheit. These cells, as they grow, the protein and fat are separate. They create waste, which has to be removed. And there's several points of where a person has to be involved, so points of contamination as well. But will consumers bite? A recent survey showed that 1/3 of consumers would be willing to try these products. So the big fight in the beef industry within the last year has been on the labeling and the regulation. So how will these products be overseen? Now, if you've kept up with this, and I won't deep dive into this, but after a lot of industry talk and negotiations and being at the table to talk about how these products should be regulated, I think it's a great win that both the USDA and FDA will have joint regulatory oversight on these products. That will provide us some extra safeguards once these products hit the marketplace. Food labeling wins. I got to give credit to Kentucky. It's Beef Month, and the governor here just proclaimed it to be Beef Month and also said that in the state of Kentucky, anything that's labeled beef better be beef and not a plant-based protein or a petri dish protein. Around the world, this discussion has been a hot topic as well, from France to Australia to the European Union. And I just listed here a few of the states that are working on food labeling laws and what can actually be called meat in the marketplace. Now, these companies are really playing into what clinicians are calling eco-anxiety. You know, climate change is an issue that we are all part of the discussions on. How can we be more sustainable and produce food in an efficient way that protects our natural resources? However, there are sections of our society today that refuse to procreate or have children because they are so fearful of what the climate and the planet is going to look like in a very short amount of time that they wouldn't want to burden a next generation with coming to this planet. And so you have a consumer that feels great fear and great guilt about having a hamburger because the Meatless Mondays thing has been a runaway train that's basically told people you don't have to worry about turning on the lights or driving a car, but if you just give up meat, you'll be saving the planet. And I'm excited Frank Mitloner will be talking about that in great depth here coming up. But another thing that I think is interesting is not only are our consumers very aware and have great anxiety about how our natural resources are being used in food production, but it's now become a political talking point. And so we now see everyone from Congresswoman AOC to Mayor Bill de Blasio and Cory Booker, who are running for president, by the way, or running for the Democratic nomination anyway, who don't believe that animals should be animal protein should be in the diet. And so that's a discussion for another day on how removing meat from schools is hurting the poor and hungry in those vulnerable inner city areas. However, I just want to make note of that this is a huge talking point on the political scene, and we're going to see a lot more of the cow farts that everybody's worried about in the upcoming months. And so I just kind of want to break it down for you on some of the problems I see in these petri dish proteins, or maybe a better way of saying it would be some of the advantages that the incredible beef cow has. And I think it sets the stage well for the rest of the beef sessions today because, again, we'll be deep diving further into these topics. But problem number one, cell-cultured proteins downplay their use of precious natural resources. As I mentioned, in the laboratory, it must be kept at 98 degrees Fahrenheit. We have to have a growth serum. We have to produce the meat and the fats in separate petri dishes. There is waste involved. It's not a natural resource-free deal. And so while they're downplaying their use of environmental impacts, they're greatly escalating what they think the beef animal contributes. And I think this is great information that today we produce more beef using fewer resources when compared to 1970s levels. And so I think the beef producer does a great job. And you know, I got to tell this story. I was at a conference in Michigan a few years ago, and I was doing a training, social media training, and we got talking about the different myths actually in dairy production. And I had this little boy here. I said, okay, we're going to practice our elevator speech, which is if you talk to a consumer in the grocery store, it would be who you are and where you come from and what you do on your cattle farm to produce food to feed the world. And so this little boy, he had been naughty all day, and I thought, I'm going to get this guy good. And so I called him up and I said, now pretend I'm a consumer in the grocery store and we're in the milk aisle. Come and introduce yourself to me. And so he says, hi, I'm a 5th-generation dairy farmer, and my family raises cheese, yogurt, and ice cream for your family to enjoy. And I said, wait just a minute. You mean you have cows that are farting methane into the environment and are destroying the ozone layer with their gas? And of course we know it's belches, but he says, he got real serious, he put his hand on his hip and he said, you know what, Amanda, girls fart too. And oh my, sorry if that didn't translate in other languages there, but I was greatly embarrassed, you know. But I tell this story because I think it's important as beef producers that we think about what our consumer is observing. And so often we either get defensive or we laugh because we think their questions or concerns are naive. But the consumer is in the driver's seat on how we will be able to produce moving forward. And so we need to have these conversations, listen, and then bridge the gap to their value systems. So problem number 2, lab meats can't regenerate the soil. Vaughn mentioned that I have a children's book. I just published one a couple months ago called Can Do Cow Kids. And in Can Do Cow Kids, little kids as early as preschool age get to learn that beef cattle protect the environment, preserve our rangelands, provide habitat for wildlife, and regenerate the topsoil, build topsoil, because we're able to maintain this grassland that can't be used for modernization, urbanization, or farming and monocrop agriculture. If you haven't seen the TED Talk by Alan Savory that talks about desertification of the soil, I highly recommend you watch it because it shows just exactly how that incredible beef cow can take a barren wasteland and turn it into a lush green grass which captures carbon and so many wonderful things. And so I think it's important to note that 70% of the world's surface, about 800 million acres in the US, is not fit for farming or development. However, cattle can convert this inedible cellulosic material and create a nutritious beef product. The third problem and the greatest advantage that the beef cow has to offer is the classic byproduct story. Now, I've been talking about byproducts since I was 8 years old in 4-H, and the message never grows tired to me because the cow is an all-in-one animal. Not only is she providing great tasting beef and steaks, but she can also provide insulin for diabetics, makeup, crayons, deodorants, leather. The list goes on, and it's amazing how these byproducts enrich our everyday life. And the fact that folks like Matt Ball from the Good Food Institute in America think that we don't need to operate with cattle is incredible to me. And you can see at that quote at the bottom of the page that he says, perhaps there might be a purpose for the cow in the future for specialty products, and he's probably referring to the byproducts that simply couldn't be replicated in a petri dish or created synthetically without a significant environmental impact. But he doubts that the beef industry of today will even exist 100 years from now. Problem number 4, and the National Cattlemen's Beef Association goes into great depth on this topic, but there's claims that these products will not require antibiotics. In fact, Aleph Farms has come out and directly said we'll be antibiotic-free and pathogen-free. They can't promise that there won't be contamination, and they can't promise that there won't be vulnerabilities during their processes, but that's exactly what they are claiming. And so I think we need more information from these companies on their use of antibiotics, and that all comes down to the regulatory environment and making sure the FDA and USDA are overseeing and demanding this information from these companies. Problem number 5, cell-cultured proteins don't eliminate animal suffering and death. Earlier this week, I had someone on Facebook say to me, how can you feel good about eating a beef animal knowing that your diet causes death? And I said, you know, on average, if a person ate a lot of beef, well, the average person eats 222 pounds of meat per year, so that's not even a quarter of a cow if you're just looking at a cow. So that's one death. But yet, if we were to plow up all of these fields or pastures and convert them to fields for crops like vegetables and avocados and almonds, we would be eliminating habitat for snakes, mice, rats, birds, bees, rabbits, foxes, deer. And that's something, once again, that we're able to maintain because of cattle grazing. Problem number 6. The manufacturing process has several points of vulnerability, as I discussed. We don't have information on the nutritional data on these products, nor do we quite understand the food safety implications. Now, if they were here today, I would love to ask them questions about some of these unknowns that I haven't been able to gather. But yet, I think here's a few, and I'm sorry this is word heavy here, but a few quotes to think about. The first is the stability of the cells. If you think about it, we are replicating these cells in a petri dish, which is incredible, but also scary at the same time, because it's a food that's never been eaten before by the human population. And so Juan Pascal maybe even asserts that it could be cancerous causing, because we just don't know, and we don't know what might happen if those cells continue to replicate. And again, I must say I hate fear-mongering, and I hate saying, well, this product is gonna give you cancer. Or like I saw Impossible Foods and Beyond Meats are slinging mud back and forth talking about Roundup found in their products. I hate disparaging other food products that are in the marketplace. However, I think these companies are obligated to share this information with their consumers before they enter the marketplace. The second, again, and I've touched on, is the food safety issues, the points of vulnerabilities from collecting the cells to transporting it into the petri dish to removing the waste to putting the proteins and fats together. That's a lot of human interaction in a laboratory setting that is points for vulnerability. And so again, that Aleph Farms claiming that they would be pathogen and antibiotic free is quite interesting to me, because that's like saying 100% of the time you're gonna feel great, every time you eat our product, or whatever the claim might be. So to kind of wrap it up, and I hope we have some really great questions to follow here, but I think it's really important as beef producers that we go out and share our story. And I know that sounds like generic advice, and you hear it all the time, that we must be advocates for our industry, but the truth of the matter is this: there are a lot of people that are anti-beef animal right now. From politicians scoring points in in presentations or on the campaign trail, to bloggers and activists and environmental zealots who love nothing more than to score cheap points and fill their donation coffers because they're scaring consumers, to the media who loves the clickbait headlines that these petri dish proteins have to offer. And there's so few of us today in production agriculture that we truly need to engage. And so if we go back to our consumer values, the things that our consumers truly care about, it's the same things that we care about as beef producers and beef consumers. We care about the taste, the nutrition, the safety, the environmental stewardship, the fact that that beef cow is not just sustainable, but she's regenerative and worth celebrating. We care about all of these value systems, and if we can simply put the information in front of our consumer, I think they will readily appreciate and understand the great, amazing things that the beef cow has to offer. So with that, I thank you so much for this opportunity, for the Alltech team for allowing me to come and share my story as a beef producer, and I'm excited to take any questions you might have.
Thanks, Amanda. And while we light up the whole Slido technology thing, I've got a quick question for you. What do you think the chances are of these alternative protein sources of disrupting our industry in general at this point in time in their development?
Sure. I think the plant-based proteins are hitting the marketplace in a big way. They're incredibly popular. Beyond Meat is valued at $5.1 billion right now. But I just read an article where someone is betting against that and calling it beyond stupid. So it might fizzle out just as quick as the rising star comes into the sky. But they are being touted in the media as kind of the next generation solution to protein. And again, I think the beef producer can compete. We just have to keep our story in front of the consumer and alleviate any of that doubt that they might feel when they go to the meat case.
Yep, and that's all about communicating our message. We can't put our heads in the sand anymore and hide our production process. We should be proud of them.
Absolutely,
and
yes.
We need to speak about that, otherwise we're going to get washed away.
Yes.
Okay, we got good questions here and a lot of voting, so we like to see that. So do you think that if enough states pass regulations on labeling cell culture meat as that, the federal government might follow suit?
I mean, I think it's always great to set a precedent, and the states can have that power to do that. And I think with this administration, they might be friendly to labeling laws that would make meat clearly meat and beef clearly beef. So that's my hope, and I think it's important in the states and around the world that we engage with our elected officials and ensure that the nomenclature is right on these products.
Yeah, very important. So many NGO groups see the benefit of beef and forage production. Oh, they moved it. World Wildlife Fund, Ducks Unlimited, etc. How can we work with them to spread the word?
I think it's incredible to see these organizations acknowledging the importance of grassland preservation, and that ranchers and private landowners that have these rangelands can work with these groups to ensure that those rangelands don't get plowed up and disappear forever. So I think they can be good allies. I think there's a lot of doubts or maybe some lack or trust issues maybe from both parties from previous experiences, but ultimately I think we can work together to ensure that the beef cow is part of the equation.
Yeah, and there's data behind that. So, and last question on this session today is, will these alternative proteins be able to use the word meat or beef? I think you addressed that to some point, and I guess the answer is you don't know, but can you comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, we're seeing like the Impossible and Beyond Burgers, the plant-based options, labeling themselves as meat. Per FDA guidelines, the meat part is supposed to be the very smallest, part of the label. So I think actually enforcing those laws is incredibly important. As far as the lab meats, I think it's still unknown, and so we need to be at the table to protect our nomenclature and the investment, the checkoff dollar investment that beef producers have made to promote our beef product.
Yeah. So I think from the message that I get from this, and I think we'll get from a lot of this session, is that, as I said, we can't afford to just stand back and let things happen, or even worse, hide away from things when we get scrutiny put on us. We're too small a group to not use our voices to try and defend ourselves from some of this stuff. So I really congratulate you on the efforts you've done to put that through.
Thank you very much.